Farrah Shea experienced a life-changing event. Budd Hopkins is a first-person account of the alien abduction that permanently altered her life. Of course, having read enough of the alien abduction literature, I feel the compulsion to declare up front that I have no desire for fame or fortune, and that those are not my motivations for coming forward with my story. And to prove that, I've insisted that my abduction experience remain anonymous, and that any revenue generated from the reporting of my story be donated to the Alien Abduction Survivors Fund. I've vetted this charity, and it truly is a transparent organization that is dedicated to helping survivors of alien abduction overcome the trauma that they've experienced. So, Farrah Shea is not actually my real name. And some of the details of my story have been changed. But essentially, I run a jewelry store over on Aspen Avenue in Flagstaff, down in Arizona. And ever since the pandemic hit, there had been a slew of break-ins and robberies of the business in that part of town. My own store and my warehouse had been robbed on 2 occasions, just in the year prior to the incident. So it seemed like I had no other option but to invest in upgrading my security system. And that's what I did. On August 27th, I hadn't been home for more than an hour or so. I had closed up the shop pretty late that night because I was doing inventory, and I had just started making myself a late dinner. I had the TV on. It was around 10, and I suddenly got an alert on my phone. And it was an alert from my store security app that I have for the camera system, security system. And the alert simply read, "Looks like there's some movement at the store. Are you expecting anyone?" Which indicates that the motion sensors had been triggered. So I logged onto the security app and I started watching the live feed from the cameras. And first I clicked on the camera feed for the external camera on the back side of the building, because that's what the entry point for the last 2 break-ins was. But the screen was mostly black, so I couldn't really see very much, but there was a bright kind of neonish halo of purple around the edges. Just figured it was some kind of static. And then one by one I clicked on each of the other camera feeds. The camera is positioned at the front entrance and the side entrance, and then moved on to the internal cameras. And on each of the feeds the images were blacked out except for this hazy, smoky cloud sort of moving around. Yeah, it just moved slowly across the screen. Sometimes quickly, but mostly slowly. For a moment, I had a wave of panic that maybe the building was on fire, but that fear was quickly dispelled when I checked the thermostats on the app. The thermostat read a chillingly cold 27 degrees. We're talking Flagstaff in the middle of summer, so that reading was pretty alarming in itself. As relieved as I was that the building wasn't on fire, I still had plenty of reason to be alarmed. I mostly deal in gold jewelry, but I also carry a lot of precious gems like opals emeralds, tanzanites, moonstones, quartz, garnets, which can crack if they experience sudden temperature changes or freezing temperatures. I also wasn't sure about the details of my insurance policy and whether it covers damages incurred due to acts of nature, which I was starting to assume was what was going on. So, as tired as I realized I wasn't going to get any answers from the surveillance footage, and I was hesitant to call emergency services until I had some idea of what was going on and had some time to review my insurance policy. So, in a really keyed up state, I got in my car and I drove over there. It's about 15 minutes away outside of rush hour. And the whole time I was driving pretty fast. I was watching the surveillance footage, hoping that I could get at least one clear image. As soon as I turned the corner of Humphrey Street, I had to slam on the brakes. I swear the only thing I had to drink that night was a can of Modelo, and that's not nearly enough to get me drunk, let alone buzzed. It's really tough to get the words out about what I saw next, because even though I saw all of it with my own eyes, it always sounds crazy to say it out loud. Anyway, here goes. What I saw was this absolutely staggeringly large hovering craft. Pretty similar to what people depict when they draw images of alien spacecraft. And it covered the roofs of the whole block of stores that my store is on. The craft was poised just a few feet from the roof of my store, and a large, dimly lit illuminated conveyor belt stretched from one of the many doors of the spaceship to the roof of my store. I could see objects moving along the conveyor at a pretty rapid, regular speed, but I couldn't make out what they were. I just had to assume they were boxes of jewelry from my storeroom, and my heart just sunk, and I nearly had a panic attack. Actually, I did have a panic attack. And I remember this one thought kept racing through my head while I was having that attack. I'm financially ruined. I just kept thinking, I'm ruined. My theft insurance definitely does not cover this. I've had panic attacks before. The diamond and gold business is pretty stressful, and I've watched tutorials on how to deal with panic attacks when they come on. So I did some deep breathing and some grounding exercises. And I finally calmed down enough to make the decision to call the police. Just as I was about to say, "Siri, call the police emergency number," a voice overpowered mine and said, "You don't want to do that." And with that, all the power cut out in my car and my phone screen went dark. And by voice, I mean sounds that came out like they had been produced. The best way I can describe it is produced by a pipe organ. It was the most domineering and rich voice imaginable, and it was like it came from, I don't know, like the core of the earth or the bottom of the ocean. It just had so much power behind it. I'd lost sight of the building while I was in the throes of the panic attack, because things go out of focus when I'm in that kind of state. But when the voice spoke, my store came back into focus, and I noticed this white aura, like how we imagine a force field. I saw that sort of thing surrounding just my store and not any other buildings in that area. As terrified as I was of the voice that had commanded me to not do anything, I was in fight mode at this point. That store had been in my family for 3 generations, and it was my life, especially since my husband left me a few years ago. So looking back on it now, I don't know what I was thinking. I clearly wasn't thinking clearly. I mean, there's an alien spaceship hovering over my jewelry store, and it's apparently was marauding the entire contents of the store with a force so powerful that it could cut off the power in my car and my phone from several blocks away. But yet I started running towards the building, essentially just asking them to fire at me with whatever type of weapons they had. That's what I did, though. I ran, and never have I run so fast and so furious in my life. The remaining 6 blocks down to the store, I just sprinted, and when I got there, what looked like soldiers or like a security detail were either waiting for me or they were just patrolling, I couldn't tell. And they turned towards me as I approached the building. One of them raised what looked like some kind of a laser gun at me, and I understood that I was supposed to freeze and not move. And I did freeze momentarily, but just long enough to catch my breath and reach for the handgun that I carry in my car, just in case, because I do work in jewelry and gold. I didn't even have time to lock and load it before I felt a zap, kind of like a jolt of electricity hit me and knocked me to the ground. I knew I wasn't dead, but I had this dread that I soon would be. I just felt like they would fire at me again as soon as I moved. So I tried to remain as still as I could. And when I opened my eyes and looked up, there were 6, 7 of the armored guards staring down at me. And they were chattering in that same pipe organ sounding language. They seemed to be debating what to do with me. And that's basically all I remember before I woke up inside my store, or what was left of it, strapped to some kind of inverted chair, kind of like a barber's chair that held me not all the way upside down, but maybe like 45 degrees back. And I was powerless to do anything as I watched them remove what was left of my diamonds and golds. And what was in my showroom and convey it up to their ship. And when they gutted my entire store, they took some of the fixtures even and pulled all the mirrors off the walls. None of them are 24 karat gold, but a few were gold plated, and they must have detected that. They had these scanning devices that they ran over everything. I'm assuming those devices measured the amount of gold. So they took the mirrors too. And then they raised me, still in the chair, onto their ship. And the ship hovered for a few minutes while they lifted the conveyor belts and pulled them back into the ship. And then there was this huge explosion of light I could see it through the front side of the ship's windows. And something just told me, though I didn't actually see it, that they had blown up what was left of my store. But that's not what happened. I would eventually find that out. I really should mention the opulence of the ship, because it immediately answered quite a few of my questions. The ship's entire interior was gold-plated. Parts of it even had diamond inlay. And every device on that ship had knobs and buttons of precious gems. And the aliens, whose name I never learned, they didn't make much of an effort to communicate with me. The aliens were adorned in suits glittered with kind of like gaudy arrays of rubies and emeralds and jadeite. Throughout my time with them, I would see them consume what seemed like just absurd amounts of gold. They would eat gold, and they would walk around wrapped up in gold blankets. And they even draped a gold blanket over me at certain times. And I learned later through my research that might have been to protect me from radiation as we traveled through parts of space that were higher in radiation than others, because they didn't leave the blanket on the whole time. So really all they did with me while I was on the ship, they didn't examine me, but they did interrogate me to try to gain more information about where gold mines are located on Earth. They seemed to think that I had sourced my gold from mines, which that's not how the gold jewelry industry works. I don't directly source from the mines. And they did check my mouth for, I'm assuming, gold fillings, and had I had any, I'm fairly certain that they would have extracted them. They just seemed to have gold on the brain, and that was their reason for coming to our planet. Eventually, they took me to their planet. I'm fairly certain it was their planet. And honestly, I couldn't remember the way back there if my life depended on it. The first thing I noticed about their planet was that a gold dome surrounded the entire planet. I'm guessing that this could have been designed to fend off infrared rays. And they unloaded the gold, and then they interrogated me again. Just kept trying to extract from me information about where I got my gold and about my gold suppliers. And I felt like I didn't have any other options, so I gave them as much information as I could recall from memory without my actual records in front of me. It took what felt like ages to convince them that I don't own or know of any gold mines, actual gold mines, and to explain to them that that's not how my business works, that I source from dealers and from jewelry designers who have refined the gold, not those who operate the mines. I don't know what I said, but at some point they seemed to believe me or just get frustrated and give up. And then we were back on the ship. And I don't remember don't remember the return trip as well as I do the trip going to their planet. It kind of feels like they had knocked me unconscious at some point. And the fact that I just woke up in my car at some point, back on Humphrey Street, kind of confirms that. I was really groggy for quite a while. It took me some time before I was ready to drive back home. That was probably the most difficult drive of my life, because I was just trying to process everything that had happened, and it kind of felt like a dream. I didn't drive by my store right away. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was pretty sure that it was completely destroyed. I expected to find it in ash. When I went back there, and I didn't even contact the authorities right away, I felt crazy. I felt crazy, and I suspected that no one would believe me. And as I tried to process everything, I realized that a lot of my story hinged on the state of my store. I checked the headlines to find out what had happened. And if I'd been reported missing, turns out that I had been gone for about 7 weeks. So it turns out that one of my employees had reported to work the next day and found the store completely empty and gutted, and had tried to contact me. She then reported the theft, the burglary, to the police, and reported me missing. The police located my car and found my phone in the car. So it had been assumed that I had either been kidnapped or murdered. Eventually I did speak to the authorities, and I told them basically everything that I've said here. And naturally they didn't believe me. They started investigating me for insurance fraud. I'm not sure what hearing my story would, what benefit that would have for anyone. I don't feel like there's any kind of lesson here. Maybe there's just a warning. Aliens are real. I don't know. I don't know where these aliens have come from, but I do know that they are here with us, among us. I do know that they don't have our best interests in mind, that they're here to extract resources, obviously, gold and precious gems. And I wish that our government would take that seriously, so that other people don't have to experience what I went through.